Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and yeah, we're actually doing a live video today. I guess I'm not taking the day off. The tooth problem ended up being a fairly minor fix. I do need like a retrieve, as they say, but I'm able to come back to work. I wanted to rest yesterday, but I feel bad when I don't have videos up. It's kind of like my thing to make sure that there is a video for you guys every single morning, and so I decided I would do like a quick little live stream. And I was choosing between two topics and kind of decide the other one I wanted more visuals. And we're gonna do this one live. Now the last time I did it live and I plugged up the microphone, there was no sound. Hopefully that is not the case this time. Hopefully there's sound here, but we'll see we'll see what happens. So anyway, um, today's topic is going to be a fairly straightforward one, especially for those of you who drive for Uber. And the question is, how often do you get tipped? Is it 95% of the time, 85% of the time, 70%, 60%? Is it half? Is it a third? I'm kind of curious to know how much people you how many people tip you if you are in fact still driving, because according to an article from The Verge, and which by the way, I'm sorry, yeah, because of the live nature of it, you can't see it. um, Only nearly two-thirds of Uber customers don't tip their drivers, according to a study. Um, and here's what the study said: only 1% of Uber customers always tip, while nearly 60% never do, according to a new study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. The average tip is 50 cents a ride. 50 cents a ride. So, yeah, if you do 100 rides, that's an extra $50, which sounds, I mean, which sounds, I don't know how that sounds to you, but that's it. Considering when I was working for tips, the average tip was $2 to $3 delivering pizza for Round Table years ago. That's pretty sad. Um, but for those who do tip, the average is more like three. Okay, there you go. Men are more likely to tip than women, but female drivers get tipped more than male ones. That makes a lot of sense in my opinion. Tipping has long been a source of fierce debate, especially as it relates to ride hailing companies like Uber. For years, the company rejected efforts to add a tipping option to its app, arguing it would overly complicate the seamlessness of the experience. And as I found out by reading the Super Pumped book, that was largely a Travis Kalanick thing. Apparently, there was board members in the Uber company all throughout Travis Kalanick's tenure that argued with him. We need to do this. We need to give drivers, because the drivers aren't happy, and this would go a long way to doing it. And by the way, Lyft does it, and Kalanick just never saw it as something he should do. In fact, in hindsight, that actually explains why tipping actually became part of the app like a day after Travis Kalanick was ousted. So, but Uber eventually caved, and now drivers earn hundreds of millions of dollars in tips every year. The NBER study on tipping with Uber is sure to throw more fuel to the fire. Yeah, it's funny actually. You replace the N with a U, and that would be Uber. The paper was authorized by Stanford University's Barrett Chander and University of California, San Diego's I'm sure I pronounced that name wrong. It's spelled Gneezy, as well as John List, former chief economist at Uber, who is now at Lyft. Interesting. And Ian Murr, current head of economics at Lyft. And so we should mention right now that this poll, this study, might be a little biased. We have people from Lyft working on it, so let's keep that in mind. The researchers were uniquely positioned. In addition to combining big data analyzation with field experimentation, the team actually helped Uber implement its in-app tipping option, which rolled out in June 2017. As such, they were able to develop data for more than 40 million trips. What they found was not a whole lot of tipping. Roughly 16% of Uber rides are tipped, yet most riders, 60%, never tipped over the research team's 4 weeks of data collection. Of those who do tip, very few 1% tip on every trip, which that's me, by the way. I think there's only one time recently I didn't leave a tip because the driver was actually not safe and, you know, on the phone while she was driving, like literally holding the phone and texting while she was driving. It was like, no, that person I actually didn't tip. The remainder of people only tip about 25%. This is likely because of the unique aspects of app-based ride hailing. All payments take place in the app, and riders simply hop out of the vehicle when the ride is over. It's only after the fact, sometimes long after the fact, depending on when you open the Uber app next, when riders are asked whether they want to tip. As such, the question of tipping is removed from the experience of the ride. And as Neezy explains, I think Uber drivers are tipped less than taxi drivers because tipping happens after the ride is over and not face to face. In a sense, I think that this is the right way. Riders don't tip automatically, but only if they are happy with the service. Hence, tips provide incentives for drivers. Yeah, but the thing is, what's wrong with that statement is that people in taxis tip after the ride too. Here's what I think the issue is. Truly, aside from the fact that Uber spent a long time pretty much baking no tipping into the culture, and also the fact that the tip the Uber driver is not the most obvious feature, I think it's the fact that a lot of people use Uber pretty much every day for the most part. There are people who I know personally, and I've told them not to do this because it's not going to be this way forever. They literally have sold their cars and they just Uber everywhere. That's all they do. And this is not, you know, you can't tip every day when you use a service every day because it just adds exponentially to the cost. Like, so let's say you do Uber 5 days a week and you use it at least twice a day to get to work and to get home from work. Now, regardless what the trip costs at that point, what if you're going to tip two times, like two? I'm not sorry, $2 each time. Let's just do a minimum tip. Well, that's an extra $4 a day. That's an additional $20 a week. That's an additional $80 a month. And you can start seeing where the problem is. Like people just use Uber too frequently to be able to afford a tip every single day. And here's the thing, if you're using Uber, chances are you're doing it because you're on a budget. Like you are on a budget if you are doing, well, I'm not going to say every single time. There are wealthy people who use Uber, but if you're using it every single day, some people do it because they don't have a car, or some people like it because it's more convenient. I mean, here's the thing. Once Uber became cheaper than taking public transportation, why wouldn't you take Uber instead of public transportation? But people who took public transportation don't want to tip. So, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. A lot to do with it. Now, in an email, Chandler did caution that the data was from 2017 and could be considered stale. Quote, it is not obvious to me that getting people to tip more on rideshare otherwise should be the goal. As we show in the paper, while tipping has some relationship with trip quality, it is also associated with other factors not evidently related to quality. Effects on earnings can also be ambiguous, as we show in our other paper released today. There were other interesting findings, such as riders who have a 5-star rating tip more than twice as often as those with a 4.75 rating. Well, that makes sense because if you don't get a tip, you're less likely to tip the rider. Well, here's the thing: if you don't get a tip, you're less likely to rate the rider fairly. So, let's see here. And when they do tip, they do it nearly 14% more. The team also noticed important correlations between gender and tipping. Male riders tip 23% more than female riders, a result largely driven by the fact that men are more likely to tip than women, approximately 19% more. Further, female drivers are tipped more than male drivers, a fact that is true regardless of rider gender. Women tip female drivers nearly 12% more than they tip male drivers. Yeah, I don't know why that is. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I've noticed that like my family, like my uncle, Like my Uncle Ning, he's a great tipper. My Aunt Juanita, not so good a tipper. I don't know why. And that's just them because you like then you have my Aunt Mary, my Uncle Scott. They both tip very well. So here's the thing. I'm going to this is live, so I have to add the article after we bring this to an end, which will be in a minute. I see people in the chat room, by the way. Sorry, I'm not, interacting. This is supposed to be like a fairly short thing. But I do want to like share a story because I went to Disneyland last week, and actually I called like it wasn't an Uber, it was a Lyft. Um, it's and it was a guy named Richard. Um, he picked me up, and he had. By the way, he actually got the $10,000. He did more than 20,000 rides, and he actually showed me like the video that Uber sent him when you got the $10,000. It was, I mean, the $10,000 was probably much nicer than the video, and that was great. But yeah, he was a really nice guy, and I tipped him. By the way, I tipped him $10. He was exceptionally nice. It was also kind of funny because he actually recognized who I was, so we had like a fun little conversation about that. And here's the thing, he was like very very modest for a little while, like he's like he has like all the signs up asking for 5 stars. He's like, yep, trying to get the 5 stars. And I said, and you're trying to get your tips too. And he's like, I plead the fifth. I'm just trying to get the 5 stars. But then the more you talk, it's like, yeah, it was pretty clear that tips were where he was making his money. And judging from the quality of the vehicle and his service, something tells me he makes a lot of money on tips. And I thought about that a lot more. It's like, maybe this maybe this job wouldn't be so bad. Like if you were truly working for tips on Uber and more people tip, maybe the low rates wouldn't even matter that much. Because the tips would far more than make up for what you were putting into it. But again, we have this study: nearly 2/3 of Uber customers don't tip their drivers, and so then it becomes a problem of, well, what happens when you are dependent on the fare? Like I would say that if 85% of the customers tipped, I don't know if the rates would even be that much of a discussion to a certain extent, because your income would be from this other source, not from the fare itself. But I don't know. It's a complicated matter. The fact that more riders don't tip than do is why the rates need to be better. So anyway, it's an interesting study. It's probably not surprising, and there is this new report, and you compare it to the old one, and not much has changed in terms of tipping. And heck, I see it in the comments all the time. I see it in the chat room. Like, one of the most common comments is cheap packs won't tip. So there you go. But you know what? That's where we're going to end this brief little live stream, just so that we can have a video today. Nobody complained that they couldn't hear me. So I guess the microphone worked this time. Tomorrow there will be a more polished video, just to let you know. But in the meantime, what do all of you folks think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your tips like? I would love to know. Sorry again for not interacting. This is supposed to be like a short video to be watched throughout the day. But comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe. If you enjoy my videos, consider becoming a Patreon member. It's totally optional, of course, but even as little as $1 a month goes a long way to helping the channel run smoothly. And in a sense, it's kind of like a tip. Yeah, kind of. Anyway, and if gas prices are getting you a little down, check out the Get Upside app below. It's totally free. But you do get cash back for every gas purchase. And if you want to see more content from me, check out my other channels, Kevin T. Rodriguez, the Apptrepreneur Vlogs, and Autograph Hound. And finally, if you would like to talk to me or other fellow rideshare drivers out there, check us out on Facebook at the Apptrepreneur Hangouts. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. Now I got to reach over and stop this because it's live.